There's some incredible new reporting about how involved Donald Trump was in efforts to keep some of the country's most sensitive national security documents with him forever, perhaps, if he'd had his way, and some of them at his private Florida golf club. The New York Times reported over the weekend that Donald Trump attempted to make a deal over those documents that were in his possession. He wanted FBI files relating to his campaign's ties to Russia. The Times reported this, quote, Trump, still determined to show he had been wronged by the FBI investigation into his 2016 campaign's ties to Russia, was angry with the National Archives for its unwillingness to hand over a batch of sensitive documents that he thought proved his claims. The disgraced ex-president also addressed the documents investigation over the weekend, telling a crowd in Arizona this, quote, they should give me immediately back everything that they've taken from me because it's mine. It's mine. He's not for. They took it from me in the rain. Seconds later, he claimed the, quote, radical left had planted the documents at Mar-a-Lago. Unclear if the ones planted are different from the ones that are mine. Trump's actions and conflicting narratives have now also gotten his own lawyers into potentially a whole lot of hot water. Today, NBC News can report that Christina Bobb, that's the Trump attorney who signed a letter certifying that all sensitive records in former President Trump's possession have been returned to the government. She spoke to federal investigators Friday and named 2 other Trump lawyers involved in the case. Joining us, New York Times Washington correspondent and MSNBC national security contributor Mike Schmidt, and Andrew Weissman's here, former DOJ prosecutor, a senior member of Robert Mueller's special counsel investigation, as well as an MSNBC legal analyst. Claire is still here as well. Mike, take us through what you reported over the weekend.
Well, what we reported on was how in the year and a half in which the archives was asking for these documents back, and the Justice Department was then took over the asking in a much more forceful way. In that time, Trump went back to his old playbook. He entertained outlandish ideas like trying to negotiate the boxes, giving the boxes back for these documents about the Russia investigation that he wanted access to, but it was not clear that he had people around him who could handle classified materials, so the archives was unable to give it to him. So that's an outlandish idea that doesn't seem to be rooted or understand the sensitivities of the federal records laws. He misled his lawyers. He provided them with inaccurate information about what was in the boxes, what he knew about what was in the boxes and such. And then the lawyers, when Trump got into trouble, Trump turned to the lawyers and tried to get the lawyers to take the actions, the obstructive actions, that he himself did not want to take. And this is a pattern that we know well that dates back to the Mueller investigation and something he did throughout his presidency. And the lawyers in the process, as you were saying, increased their own legal exposure and now find themselves, because they were trying to do what he wanted.
I think you are the first person to report that he wanted, this is the Crossfire Hurricane investigation in his campaign. Why would an ex-president want that?
Why would an ex-president want it? Why would Donald Trump, I guess, want it? I think that he's been obsessed with Russia. Russia is a through line that starts before he comes into office, and it runs all the way through. It's an obsession that he has. It is rooted in his decision to get rid of Comey. It is rooted in his decision to try and even the playing field after the Mueller investigation and get Rudy Giuliani to try and even things out for him by pushing the Ukrainian government to do the investigations of his allies that, not his allies, his enemies that he wanted to be done. It's the same, he's still obsessed with it. He's still obsessed with it and trying to prove it. It seems like the biggest obsession of the day is the election, obviously something he probably talks about more, but he is also obsessed with trying to unring the bell of the Russia problems that he had.
I mean, Andrew Weissman, it's all those things. And I think from a counterintelligence perspective, it's also standing in Helsinki and saying, I believe him. I believe him. It's every denial we ever heard him say publicly, and all the ones we never heard him say that probably Sue Gordon and the intelligence community did hear. I mean, that is perhaps the most chilling detail to emerge about what he wanted to keep.
Well, I look at this with my former prosecutor's hat on, and the reporting from Mike and Maggie Haberman and the speech that you talked about that he gave over the weekend are really damning evidence, because the typical defense for somebody like Donald Trump is what a CEO argues, which is, I didn't know the details. I don't have the knowledge or intent to have violated the law, meaning I didn't know what was at Mar-a-Lago. I didn't know the content of what was at Mar-a-Lago. And so I didn't have an intent to illegally take or retain these documents. That would be what a sort of CEO would probably argue. And it's typically what we see in CEO cases. And the trick is always, how do you show that somebody like Donald Trump knew what was at Mar-a-Lago? And it wasn't just his lawyers or underlings who knew the details. Well, that he's trying to engage in the art of the deal with respect to classified documents, and he's saying these documents were all mine. Those are incredibly damning statements that go directly to knowledge and intent. And you can be sure that the DOJ prosecutors are doing what I'm doing, which is listening to this going, this is making it that much easier to prove the only element that it could pose any real difficulty for the Department of Justice in bringing a case involving the Mar-a-Lago documents. So yes, I agree with you that there are all sorts of horrendous things when you take the big picture, that he's thinking of trading these documents and using them this way when they're national security documents. But from a criminal perspective, his statements are even, more damning and are going to be, I think, much more harmful to him.
Andrew, if anyone who's read the Mueller report knows that in the obstruction volume, the obstructive act is next to the criminal act. And I feel like it's all out in the open. Why not charge the crimes of obstruction now, today? Might that help you get the criminal act, which is taking the classified documents, back faster if you're already facing a bunch of charges for criminal obstruction?
Well, one really good reason, Nicole, for that to be done is the reporting about the lawyer Alex Cannon, who refused to sign a false certification, supposedly that his arm was being twisted by people, including Donald Trump, is exactly analogous to what Don McGahn said happened to him as the White House counsel. So you have two really similar acts of obstruction. And if you're the department, you kind of want those to work together. So there is a reason to do both of those. And there also is the issue that if you don't charge that readily, soon, something called the statute of limitations is going to run, because you only have a certain amount of time to bring criminal charges after the criminal act has occurred. But having said that, I don't think that the department is going to do that. They did not look like they were terribly interested in following up on the information that was in the Mueller report when they took office. And so, I think it's a great question. It could come in as potential evidence at a trial related to Mar-a-Lago, but I wouldn't hold your breath, as I think you probably know, on whether the department's going to include those charges.